pleased to have the mayor here, and we're going to hear from him, and then we'll take some questions from you in an orderly manner, which I know you will be. We don't have to agree, because we know we don't all agree. We know that going in here, but we can agree to be agreeable relative to how we approach our discussion. So without any further ado, let us welcome the Mayor of the City of Detroit, Honorable Dave Baker.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and my honor and pleasure being here with you this morning. Needless to say, there are a lot of things going on in the city of Detroit. I think the unfortunate thing from my vantage point is the only thing that seems to be talked about are the negative things that we have going on in Detroit. And in my State of the City, I try to point out the positive things that are going on, because there are so many people in our city that are doing good things. And they're doing it because they love the city and they want to see this city come back. But, you know, I inherited a situation, and I'm not going to go back and try to disperse blame on anybody, because that does not solve the problem. But there are facts that I think we have to talk about, and one of the things that I think this administration has done a pretty decent job of is speaking from facts. When I first came into office, I said that the city was into a financial crisis. That was almost 4 years ago. And the city is still in a financial crisis, and from my opinion, we're going to be there for a while yet. It's a combination of a lot of things, as the Reverend said, that should have been done years ago that wasn't done. So it all culminates into now and the things that we are confronted with that we must do. When I came into office, I knew that things were tough, especially from a financial standpoint. But when I had a chance to go out through all the major departments, I really saw just how out of touch a lot of our departments were in terms of just plain business practices. We have been doing the same thing for years and years, and nobody wanted to change. So there were a lot of policies, a lot of procedures, whatnot, that we had to institute to make the necessary changes to get things better. You know, if you were to go back several years, when we had population, when I first came to this city, that exceeded about 1.5 million in the mid-60s. We're now half the size of what we were in the mid-60s. We have the same infrastructure that we had in the mid-60s, without the same population and without the financial resources to maintain or upgrade some of the systems that were in play. And so it was on my watch that I had to make a lot of very tough decisions. And they're unpopular, because any time that you make decisions that are going to negatively impact people, nobody likes it. But if we're going to have a city that has a future for the next generation, we got to start making the changes now. Changes should have been made yesterday, but they weren't, so it's on my watch that these changes have to take place. Now, I'm going to not give a long dissertation, because I'd much rather hear from you with the questions and the concerns that you have, so I can respond appropriately. But there are a lot of things that are going on right now. Everybody is talking about the financial crisis that we're in. Initially, 6 months to a year ago, it was all about whether or not we're going to run out of money, whether or not we're going to have payless paydays, whether or not we're going to have an emergency manager, whether or not we're going to have to file Chapter 9 bankruptcy. And as I said in my State of the City, none of those things have happened. I've been in office now for 45 months. We've not had a payless payday. Cash flow has been a major issue, and that's what we really focused our attention on early on, to make sure we didn't run out of money. Because a city is really a business, and once you've run out of money, you're out of business. So I had to make sure that we didn't run out of money. So we did a lot of different things to make sure that that didn't happen. There were all of these goalposts that the state put in front of us and said, these are milestones that you have to reach, otherwise we're coming in. Well, we've reached most of those milestones, not all, but most of them. And we're now no longer talking about a payless payday. We have a cash flow situation that is still dubious, but it's under control, and we have enough cash to take us through the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30. So as we start to solve that short-term problem, another goalpost was put up, and that was long-term liabilities, which you hear about now. What are long-term liabilities? Well, it's basically post-operation benefits, health care, and pension costs. For 40 years now, we've been pushing our health care and our pension costs, we've been pushing it away by borrowing money. And at some point in time, you know, if you borrow money, you've got to pay it back. And we're now at a position where we have to start paying this money back. For instance, the interest rate on the outstanding debt. When I came in the office, the long-term liabilities had a value of about $13.8 billion. We're a little over $14 billion as I stand in front of you today. And there's some things that we have no control of, like the cost of health care, that has gone up double figures for the last 5 or 6 years. It's projected to go up double figures for the next 5 or 6 years. That's beyond our control. That's a national problem, but it's one that has to be looked at. We were borrowing money back in the 60s at an interest rate of, in some cases, 7 and 8%. And in some cases, we've not been able to go in and reevaluate and renegotiate the interest rates. That's what we're starting to do now. But this city, we had a workforce when I came into office of over 14,000 people. We didn't have enough money for 14,000 people. So we had to start cutting. And that's been, ever since I've been in office, I mean, we've cut. We're now down to about 9,400 employees. The biggest problem that I think we're going to have on a going forward basis is what do we do with our post-liabilities, post-employment liabilities, and that's the $14 billion. We're not going to solve that problem short term. We are going to renegotiate interest rates because they're much lower now than they were. But we're not in a strong enough position to go out and use the leverage of being a strong city and get the interest rates where they're basically in the marketplace and say that they're comparable to what anybody else can borrow for. But we are going to go out and do that. We have retirees at this point totaling about 24,000 people. And we've got 9,400 active employees. The math doesn't work. There's no way that 9,400 people are going to be able to create the pension and the cash flow for 24,000 people. So we've got to, at some point in time, step up to the mic and say we're going to have to deal with retirees and their benefits. Now, from a pension standpoint, pension will be locked in, but we've got to do something with health care because that is out of control. When you look at some of the problems that we have with losing so many talented people, whether it's retirement or people just saying, I can't take this anymore, whatever the case may be, we've lost some talent. And we don't have, in my opinion, the necessary skill sets to do a lot of the things that need to be done to bring our city back. So we've had to go out with the state and bring in outside consultants. And people will say, well, you're paying these consultants all of this money. Why don't you pay people in the city of Detroit? Well, in order for us to get this done as soon as possible and be effective and efficient, we had to cut a deal with the state. And because the state is paying for some of these outside consultants. They're paying for 50%. In most cases, they're paying 50% of the cost for the outside consultants. I will tell you, Ernst & Young, as the accounting firm that's working with us and has been for the last 2 or 3 years, is a good company. They're good to work with. They care about the city. They provide very, very good numbers. So we've got a great relationship with Ernst & Young. Most recently, there were contracts that were signed with Miller Buckfire, which is a banking firm out of New York. And they're the firm that's going to help us renegotiate some of the long-term liabilities. A pretty good firm, but for me, they are too focused on selling assets. And I don't, I want to stay away from that as best we can. But they're trying to scare the marketplace right now so that they can derive some leverage to negotiate. But, you know, I'm going to wait on them. That's a gray area for me. The actuarial firm that's working with us is Milliman. And I think they're a strong firm. They're doing an outstanding job, giving us some good data. And so I think they were the right choice. Then there's a local firm, Conway McKenzie, that's coming in to help us from an operational standpoint. And their fees, in my opinion, are astronomical. We didn't have a lot of say-so. The state was really pushing for this firm to come in. And they are now here, but the school is out on them so far. I'm not sure that they're the right firm to help us from an operational standpoint. And they charge us more than any other firms on an hourly basis. When you start looking at the milestones that were negotiated between this administration and Lansing, we had 25 milestones with a consent agreement. And some of those milestones have been reached at an acceptable level by the state. So we're moving that process forward. But it's unrealistic to think that we can solve the 25 milestones in a very short period of time. So the state has been, you know, very critical in terms of how fast things are moving. But I don't know that we can move them faster because we've got some impediments to moving some of these initiatives and some of these milestones faster than we have. And the first one, I think, would be our charter. The charter was rewritten a year ago, and I think it was skewed based on what happened in the last administration. And so I think we've gone overboard because there are a lot of things that we like to do that we can't do because of the charter. So for those of you who have a copy of the charter, I think we've got to go back and take a hard, critical look at it and see. I don't say throw it out, but there are some areas that I think we have to go back and make some changes. So that's an impediment. Secondly, I would say that labor, as much as we work with labor, as much as we need labor to work with us, it's an impediment because of union contracts right now. A lot of the union contracts don't expire until June 30th. And so there are things that we would like to do with the contracts that we can't do without getting sued. So we got to make sure that we honor the contracts until their expiration date. I will tell you, contrary to public belief, last year, this was 11, we had great meetings with our labor unions where we came to tentative agreements with our labor unions. And we, with those tentative agreements, we were able to save and negotiate about $102 million on an annual basis. And when I took those tentative agreements to Lansing, Lansing said it's not enough. And so they wouldn't sign off on it. And so that really put me in a bad position because I think labor and our administration bargained in good faith and came to an agreement, and the agreement that we came to was rejected by the state. And that put us in a bad situation. We haven't recovered from that yet. Then we've got all of the lawsuits. Every time you turn around, we got a legal department that can't keep up with our lawsuits because every time you turn around, whether it's internal or external, there's a lawsuit. Our staff isn't big enough, to be very honest with you, to handle all of the lawsuits that are coming. And I don't know if there are lawyers in the room, but I got my own issues with lawyers because I'm not so sure in these lawsuits they add any value whatsoever. But it costs us a hell of a lot of money. Then you've had the issue between my office and council. And once again, I would say 90% of the things that I take to council, we come to some kind of agreement on. It's a slow process, but usually we get on the same page. The 10% that we don't agree upon are the things that are blown out of proportion, and we never get along, you're always fighting, and blah, blah, blah. For the most part, we get things done, but once again, it's a process that takes way, way too much time.